Hey guys, welcome to this week's video. So today what I'm going to chat about is pre and post workout nutrition. What should you be eating before you train in order to feel fueled, and what should you be having after you train in order to recover effectively? Now, before I get into it, I'm going to tell you I'm not going to give you specific things to eat. And the reason being is because there's a lot of personal preference and individuality that comes into this. Guys, I'm going to give you an example. For me, myself, I can have a meal just before I train and I will feel fine. However, I know a lot of people, if they do that, they're going to start to feel ill during their session. They need a bit of time between when they eat and their training session in order for them to feel fine during their session and not start to feel sick. So that's why I say there's a bit of personal preference and individuality that comes into this. So I'm not going to give you specifics, but I am going to give you guidelines and things that you should think about when deciding when you eat before you train and what you have before you train and after you train. Pre-workout nutrition, guys. For this, I'm going to give you 3 things that I want you to think about. So tip number 1, pre-workout nutrition is just to make sure that you're feeling fueled, guys. Don't go into your session fasted or on an empty stomach or feeling hungry as much as you can, guys. It's going to lead to an ineffective session. That's obviously not what you want. You know what you want. You want to make sure that you're going into your session feeling good, feeling full of energy and ready to smash it. And part of that is making sure that your body has the fuel to do that. So this is obviously going to come down to when you train and a little bit of forethought and preparation. If you train early in the morning, that doesn't mean you have to have something before you train. It depends on when you wake up. But think about the meal you have the night before and make sure that that's sufficient enough to carry you through that session in the morning, and then focus really on that post-workout nutrition if that's your situation. If you train later in the day, make sure that your last meal before that isn't breakfast. Have something in between that's going to fuel you for that session. A breakfast and then training in late afternoon, that's not really sufficient for a good session, guys. So that is your first tip for pre-workout nutrition. Now, tip number 2 is to primarily stick to protein and carbohydrates. And reason being is that those macronutrients are easier for your body to digest, and they're not going to leave you feeling a little bit iffy during your session. So what happens is fat is a little bit harder for you. It takes a little bit longer for your body to digest. It needs to work a little bit harder for this to happen. And if our body during a training session has to then send blood and stuff to the muscles and focus on other things, digestion isn't happening as effectively. And if it needs to work hard to digest fat, obviously that's not going to happen too well, guys. So fats, try and get those in at times away from your training sessions. And for pre-workout nutrition, try and stick to your proteins and your carbs, guys. Those are the ones that are most important. And tip number 3 for pre-workout nutrition, guys, is just try and stay away from overpowering flavors. Things like spicy foods particularly, that could lead to a little bit of indigestion during your session, and that's not what you want. But big flavors that may sort of start coming up during your session and you taste them at the back of your throat, that's not what you want. So try and stick to simple things, nothing too overpowering for your pre-workout nutrition, and that should leave you golden, guys. So those are your 3 tips. Number 1 for pre-workout nutrition is make sure that you're actually fueling yourself. Number 2, focus on protein and carbs and try to get your fats away from your training sessions. And number 3 for your pre-workout nutrition is just stay away from overpowering flavors that you may taste in the back of your throat during your session. Okay, post-workout nutrition, guys, 2 things I want you to think about here. So number 1 is similar to your pre-workout nutrition, is to actually have something, guys. Don't just forget about it after your session or only have your next meal hours later. Your body needs to be refueled after you've trained, so give it something. It doesn't have to be a full sit-down meal straight after you've trained, but just have something to eat after you've had a training session in order to refuel after that. I find too often this is something that people just don't even think about, only think about it later in the day. Okay, so tip number 1 is to actually refuel after your session, guys. Second thing I want you to think about is in terms of the macronutrients and which takes priority after your session. So what happens during a training session is we deplete your muscles of muscle glycogen. Now, glycogen is essentially just broken down carbohydrates that are stored in the muscles and used as fuel during your gym session, during training sessions or physical activity. we need to now replenish that after your gym session. So carbohydrates need to be have had fairly soon after your gym session in order to replenish that muscle glycogen. So that's what takes priority after your session. Thereafter, then you can think about getting in the protein and the fats after that. You could do it all in one meal, guys. If you're able to have a decent meal after, you're going to get your protein, your carbs, and your fats A for away. But number one priority needs to be the carbs. Thereafter is the proteins and the fats after that. Guys, I hope you found this informative about your pre and your post-workout nutrition. Got any questions? Swing them back to me. Otherwise, have a great weekend and I will see you next week.